Yeah, just a disclaimer, first of all, I'm in no way an expert on deliberative democracy or citizens' assemblies or on climate issues actually either. But I, like Alessandra said, I was a participant in the Camden process last summer, and it really had a huge impact on me. So I'm really happy to just share my experience of it. I'm just going to really briefly talk about the process, but not spend very long on that because there's loads of information online. But just give you a sense of what it was and what it was trying to achieve. And then I've been thinking about kind of my main takeaways and reflections on it. And I've got kind of 5 positive things that really had a positive impact on me, and 5 things that I think we can learn from the Camden process going forwards. So just really briefly, the proposition or the question that the Camden Assembly was trying to answer, I'll just read it out, was, we are now facing a climate and ecological crisis. How can the council and the people of Camden help limit the impact of climate change while protecting and enhancing our natural environment? And second, what do we need to do in our homes, neighbourhoods, council and country? So a pretty huge question, but defining the fact that we're facing a climate and ecological crisis at the beginning of the question, which I thought was a useful basis, that's not up for discussion. So in terms of process, we met 3 times through July. So it was 2 evening sessions and 1 kind of full day session. The first session was kind of like presenting evidence. They had some people presenting from UCL, from various academics, various sustainability consultancies, also some residents presenting to the Assembly. They also collected submissions from local businesses, they did school sessions and got school submissions from school kids in the local area. And there was also a kind of public consultation process online where people could submit answers. The Assembly got a lot of publicity actually. It was featured a lot in The Guardian, which I think is, I mean, obviously The Guardian, but it's quite unusual for these processes to get national coverage. Keir Starmer, the local MP, also came and gave a kind of introductory speech, and the council leader. And the outcome was that the Assembly had to vote after lots of complicated rounds. It was run by Involve, complicated process for brainstorming ideas and then voting on the ideas and then refining the ideas further and voting again. So a very long process of voting. But in the end, we agreed on 17 actions across home, neighbourhood and council levels. So those were the 3 levels that that was how they divided the different ideas. All of them received a big majority of support. None of them had less than 75% agreement, and most of them had more than 90% agreement. So there was pretty clear consensus on most of the proposals. And just to give you a really quick idea of some of the ideas, at the home level, there was one idea around encouraging low carbon dietary choices, making all new homes zero carbon, creating more green space on streets, more public communication campaigns, better communication from the council about what the options are. Planting more trees and green space came up a lot actually. Some proposals around community energy, cycle lanes, car-free zones, and also quite a theme around accountability and kind of scrutiny of the council. So people were really keen for a kind of scrutiny panel that would involve citizens in the scrutiny process, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, all the proposals are obviously online. I won't go through all of them, but it gives you a kind of idea. And the propositions were then presented at the full council meeting in October last year, which was also the day that the council voted to declare a climate and ecological emergency and to set in motion the climate action plan, which was going to be the council's response to the 17 proposals that were given them. The action plan's now been published, and there's a public consultation going on about the action plan, but the action plan includes almost all of the proposals that were laid out by the Assembly in different forms, but most of them are in there, which is a really good thing. Okay, so just some reflections from my point of view as obviously as a non-expert, but just from my experience, maybe I'll start with the learnings so that we end on the positives. But things that came out that probably could have gone better. Number one, the voting mechanism was really complicated, and kind of because it was basically a simple majority each time of cutting out ideas, it meant that quite a lot of the more radical or more creative ideas basically got cut out quite early in the process, including the idea of divesting the council's pensions, which was a bit of a shame. There was no sense of the kind of criteria that we were really using to decide on which proposals to go with. So there was obviously not enough time to have a sense of what the carbon impact of each idea would be, what the cost would be, what the opportunity cost would be. We didn't have much information to go on really, because it was such a huge question. Number two, there was some issues around participation. Obviously, it was demographically representative of the borough. People had been stopped on the street and asked if they would participate, and then a representative sample was taken from that list. But obviously, there are some people that are less likely to be hanging around in the street. There are some people that couldn't be represented for various reasons. There's the obvious the power dynamics that play out in the room around who's comfortable speaking. So there was some effort made to kind of include everyone in the conversation, but definitely more could have been done, I thought. Number three, it really showed how important good follow-up is, I thought. So there was a follow-up meeting where the Assembly members were invited back to the council to see how the council were working up the ideas into the current work streams of the council. But there wasn't much transparency around that process. It wasn't clear sometimes why some ideas had been taken out and some had been almost added back in that hadn't been voted for. So there was some confusion around that. Also, there wasn't much attendance at that follow-up session. Number four, there was some confusion around the involvement of the council, because this assembly was organised by Camden Council, and the council staff were there. Some of them were facilitating. The council leader was there at the beginning. I think there was the assembly members that had reasons to be suspicious of the council maybe, or that didn't really have faith in the council's good faith, didn't have a sense that the process was being carried out in a transparent and good faith way, I guess. So there was a sense of needing to sometimes there was a bit of confusion about who we were trying to hold to account. Sometimes the academic speakers would come and people would be challenging them as if they were kind of like the politicians with the power to have made the difference. And fifth, I think, as I've mentioned before, there kind of wasn't really enough time to digest all the information we were getting. That we didn't really know what Camden had been doing up until that point. And it was just a huge amount of evidence to be kind of weighing up in a short amount of time. So I think those are some learnings. I think it was an overwhelmingly positive experience. So I just wanted to share some positive things as well. So I've got another 5 positives. So number one, it was a really respectful and cooperative atmosphere and place to have a conversation. So that was the thing that really struck me, I think, all the way through, was that people really wanted to listen to each other. People really wanted to hear the evidence. And in the kind of like post-truth politics, it felt really refreshing to just sit down and be presented with evidence, and to be asked to reach some decisions based on evidence. So that was a really positive thing. There was also a real consensus that we need to act really urgently. There were no climate deniers in the room. There was nobody that was trying to be obstructive, really. There was a real consensus that this is an unprecedented challenge, that we really need to act urgently. And when we were presented with what the council could do or could have been doing, a question that often was asked was, why haven't you done this already? This is insane. So there was a real sense of urgency and kind of, yeah, a sense of wanting there to be accountability for like, why hasn't this already happened? Which I thought was a really positive thing again. Third, yeah, so I think the fact of having a demographic representation of the borough meant that the issues of kind of justice and just transition were really at the forefront of everyone's minds. So, for example, the kind of costs to individuals of particular policies were questions that people often wanted to ask, like if I have a disability and I need my car, what's the impact going to be on me of not being able to drive my car on a car-free day? Or what are the costs of switching to solar energy, and what does that mean for me? So that was really important. Obviously, that's an incredibly important part of any climate policy, and it felt like that those issues really came to the surface quickly when people were talking to each other honestly. Fourth, it felt like, I think I mentioned this already too, but it felt like the participants really wanted to have the tools and the mechanisms to hold their representatives accountable. So it kept coming up, the issue of how are we going to make sure you do this? How can we have faith that you'll implement any of these ideas? How can we also stay active and stay involved and keep collectively organizing around this? And I think there has been some follow-up, but not enough follow-up to really keep that energy going, I think. But there was a real sense that we need better communication, we need to be more connected to each other. People that had never spoken to each other and would never normally interact, that were kind of living side by side, suddenly thought we actually have the power to make sure that this gets done.